Narcissistic family systems or dysfunctional family systems will not allow their children to experience joy. Joy happens when somebody is able to find contentment in any situation, then moments of joy follow. But a child in a narcissistic family system will not allowed to be content, will not allowed to simply be at peace, and will certainly not be allowed to remain in a state of calm. How does the narcissistic family system make sure that this happens, and what can we do about it? Hello and welcome to the channel. This is Leilani Simon from Seeking Wisdom Coaching. So back to the topic. If a child is filled with joy, they can't anymore be a sponge for someone else's misery. Now this dysfunctional family system needs each member of the system to lose sense of who they are so that they lend self to the system and then borrow self from the system. But in these states of lending and borrowing self, that child is not allowed to be their true, authentic self. If the child can't be used as a vessel for serving the management of the emotional system in the family, then they're not going to be useful. But a child has to be useful. For their survival, the child has to make itself useful to the family. And this is why it's at no fault of anybody who's grown up in a family that is a narcissistic or dysfunctional system. It's not their fault that they were trained to be who they are or to have the defensive responses that they have. So in this dysfunctional system, the system's guilt, the system's shame has the children looking to those narcissistic parents or parent for validation and looks to appease the system. Everything they do in life is about walking on eggshells and making sure they don't do something wrong according to the family system. The child needs the parents and the system needs the children locked into their emotional role, whether that is scapegoat, golden child, invisible child, mascot, etc. So the system's shame and guilt is the glue that keeps the child locked into this position. A truly content child in a healthy system can't be manipulated into not being content and won't be manipulated into not being content. And then they're not able to absorb other people's negative emotions or emotions at all because they're too busy being their true self and being themselves to absorb anyone else's anxiety or misery. So the system is in place and it manages the emotions of each individual, and it does this through that enmeshment. If somebody is going to be too authentic or too calm, soon the system will bring them back down to earth, not real earth, their version of earth, with manipulation, with criticism, with gaslighting. You know, how could you, to think that you could be that makes you crazy. How could you even imagine that you could be that, i.e. soar to the heights, that your creator has made you to soar to. So translating into the adult years, this child who's been conditioned in this way grows up to be very uncomfortable with peace and calm. They've been conditioned into being hypervigilant and to always looking out deep down to see when's the penny going to drop when there is a situation of peace or calm. It's like it's not comfortable. And this is why often those who grow up in these narcissistic or dysfunctional households find it difficult to enter into a relationship with someone who's not also come from an emotionally enmeshed and dysfunctional system. Because if they are with someone who grew up in a healthy family system, they may not be accustomed, well, they definitely won't be accustomed to that sense of peace and calm. And this might put them on edge, where they're always thinking, when's the penny going to drop? Just something doesn't fit about it, and it doesn't feel familiar enough. and literally the familiar spirits are not at play there. And it's interesting because you'll be more than happy to have other people being at joy and at peace, but it doesn't inspire that joy and peace in yourself. When it's in yourself, that guilt floods in, a sense of shame floods in, and there's this worry that's an underlying whir. The system's trained you to be on edge regarding your own peace. As long as you're still tiptoeing around, watching out for the feelings of others, specifically the narcissists in the system, and also the enablers, the flying monkeys within the system, and not only the mean flying monkeys, but also the enablers that don't even realise they are enablers within a dysfunctional system. So one has to look out for all of their feelings, and one is considered useful as long as you are doing that. However, as soon as you begin to try and be that person who is content in any situation and be peaceful and find joy in whatever random moments, this isn't of use to the dysfunctional system. They need you pliable, manipulatable. They need you enmeshed. But you do stand to lose something when you decide that enough is enough. Now is the time to regain my peace, or even just to learn what it is in the first place. There is something that stands to be lost, and each person has to ask themselves, what could I lose if I decide to assert my rights to be peaceful, to be authentic, and to be joyful? If you think about it, what one might stand to lose is the system itself, or at least members of the system who don't quite know how to behave regarding the new real you. It could trigger some people into anger, pushback, not wanting to know the real you. Now that's the risk that has to be taken. Not every system is made the same. Some systems will change themselves in order to accommodate the new you, and some systems won't be able to do that. But that's a risk each person has to weigh up for themselves. However, if one doesn't decide to take that risk, then it's also worth noting that one can't be truly authentic in that situation. And if you're not truly authentic in that situation and experience true peace and true calm when dealing with those individuals in that dysfunctional system, you will never, ever be able to truly connect with them. Because unless we are able to come from a place of vulnerability, and unless we are able to be truly authentic, and those two things go hand in hand, being able to be vulnerable and being authentic, then we will never be able to connect with those people anyway. And in a dysfunctional system, the most dysfunctional people, most likely, at least to start with, will have no ability to be able to connect with your authentic self. Because it's only with safe people that we can truly allow ourselves to be vulnerable and where we can truly connect. Authenticity threatens a dysfunctional system, but there may be others if you decide to become the authentic version of yourself with them, and it takes work and it takes effort. And this is, as long as the family is not so narcissistic that all they do is abuse you, there may be other members within the system that will see you shining a light, and they might start to have some light bulbs turn on in their own mind, and they might start to see what is happening. You need to weigh it up for your own family system. So authenticity threatens the system, not only because then the people being authentic can't be emotionally controlled by the system, but also because of this risk of shining a light onto the system as a whole. So to be free and to be set free, an individual needs to retrain themselves to not look to the family system for validation or for approval. But whilst growing up, when you tried to attain your own sense of independence and individuality and to individuate from the system, this was quickly smashed down, the attempt. Like I said before, they'll do this through criticism, through creating a crisis, or through making you feel selfish for daring to be happy. The issue about seeking approval from them is when you grow up, even if you have distanced yourself from the narcissistic members of the family, inside you, you have the voice of the narcissistic family inside your head. And this can bring self-doubt into us when we want to do something to, work towards that individuality and that authenticity. We can self-sabotage because we have that critical voice of the narcissistic parents in our heads telling us, are you sure you're able to do that? Oh, come on, you've never succeeded in anything before. How are you going to succeed in that now? You see, as an adult, if we haven't healed yet, we have the introjected voice of the narcissistic parents inside our head. We don't even need them there to do the work of the dysfunctional family system. We don't need them physically there. So even if our system is so dysfunctional we need to go no contact from those people, we also need to work on getting that introjected narcissistic system voice out of our own heads. So if we can become aware of this push and pull of those voices inside our head, the voices of the dysfunctional system, we can then develop the ability to choose whether or not we pay heed to those voices. And we can even tell those voices, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I think this, whatever that is. So those introjected voices in our head are why we second guess ourselves and self-sabotage our own plans. And this is especially prevalent for the scapegoat of the system, although the golden child is also not allowed to be truly authentic. They are the praise basket, so all of their accolades is done for the system. And the scapegoat at the same time as the shame basket. Their misery is for the system, their demise is for the system, their lack of being able to attain anything of value in a worldly way is for the benefit of the system. Neither the scapegoat nor the golden child is truly allowed to own and have and live in their own content, calm and peace, and therefore joy. It's understandable why this happened to anyone who grew up in such a family system as a child. There is no blame on the child. The child is simply just trying to survive. They need to survive for their own livelihood. And then we come into adulthood and we realise these defence mechanisms we have and this emotional enmeshment with the family, it's not really serving me anymore. And then as an adult, we can decide to take responsibility for what is happening and to become self-differentiated from the dysfunctional family system and to get that dysfunctional family system's voices from out of our minds. Yes, this takes time, and yes, this takes work. And yes, we have to be very compassionate to ourselves and self-forgiving as we go through this process because, as I've said before, we will fall down and then we get up again. Attaining this peace, it does involve challenge and it involves a lot of reflexivity. And we have to ask ourselves, is it worth the work? Personally, from experience, I definitely say that it is. It is definitely worth derobing of the role that we were assigned as children. And yes, it was helpful before. But if we truly want to be authentic now, content and at peace, those robes will no longer serve us. So this is Leilani Simon from Seeking Wisdom Coaching. If you have got this far, please do press the like button and please do subscribe. It helps me, it helps the algorithm. And before I leave, I'd just like to read a verse from Jeremiah 29:11, where God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." Bye for now.